Something incredible just happened down under. In Melbourne, Australia, a city known for its coffee and trams, a different kind of storm was brewing. On September 2nd, 2025, hundreds of Indonesians gathered at Federation Square. They transformed the square into a platform, a loudspeaker aimed at Jakarta. Their demonstration, people taking back power. It was more than a slogan, it was a mission. This was one of the largest, most vibrant Indonesian diaspora protests Australia has seen. For many, Australia is a new home, but distance only sharpened their concern for Indonesia. These were students, professionals, families, citizens who felt the tremors of injustice from afar. They carried the weight of loved ones back home and refused to stay silent. The energy was electric: anger, hope, frustration, and solidarity. Chants, stories, and speeches echoed across the square. The Melbourne Movement, led by Pipin Jamson, declared this a gathering to defend humanity. This wasn't about one policy, it was about a system that rewards the powerful and crushes the powerless. Melbourne's protest was a microcosm of a larger story unfolding across Indonesia and the globe. It was a visual representation of collective heartbreak and disappointment. Imagine needing to rally in another country just to be heard by your own government. The message to Jakarta was clear. We are watching, we are organized, and we demand change. Federation Square's message was unambiguous. The people are taking back their power. Whether the elite are ready or not, the movement has begun. What pushes a nation to the brink? Sometimes it's a blatant act of greed. In late August 2025, while Indonesians struggled with soaring costs, their politicians gave themselves a new monthly housing allowance. The amount? $4,700 AUD, 6 times the minimum wage in Jakarta. This was on top of already generous, tax-free salaries. The gap between the elite and ordinary citizens became a chasm. The allowance was a symbol of everything wrong, a government insulated from its people. The news hit like a grenade. Tensions had been simmering for weeks. People were struggling to afford basics, fuel, food, rent. The leaders, meanwhile, lined their own pockets. The housing allowance became the final straw. Outrage exploded online, then spilled into the streets. Protests began on August 25th, not led by parties but by ordinary people. Students, workers, activists, and first-time protesters united in frustration. The movement was spontaneous, grassroots, and fueled by betrayal. The housing perk wasn't the only issue, but it was the spark. It confirmed the worst fears. The government was a private club for the rich. The reaction was immediate and visceral. The protests spread nationwide and even overseas. The housing allowance was the match that lit a nationwide fire. A movement was born, demanding real change. The anger over perks reached a boiling point. And then tragedy struck. Affan Kurniawan, a 21-year-old motorcycle taxi driver, joined the Jakarta protests on August 28th. He was killed by a Brimob police vehicle. Affan became the face of the struggle, a young gig worker, crushed by the very system he protested. His death transformed the movement from outrage over perks to a fight for justice and dignity. Pipin Jamson said drivers like Affan are crushed by capitalism long before state violence. The government's apologies felt hollow. Protesters wanted real accountability. The demands grew, not just for justice for Affan, but for an end to police brutality and systemic abuse. Affan's story gave the protests moral clarity and urgency. His name became a rallying cry, justice for Affan. The movement now had a human face, a tragic symbol of state violence. Protesters in Jakarta and Melbourne carried his story with them. This was no longer about perks, it was about basic human dignity. The government's perks had become a fatal punch to the nation's gut. The people were fighting back, united by Affan's memory. In Melbourne, the Indonesian diaspora's voices painted a picture of a global awakening. These weren't paid activists. They were students, researchers, workers compelled to act. Maria Yanita Sidohang, a doctoral student, called the protest an organic movement. No foreign funding, no outside agenda, just Indonesians demanding better. This grassroots effort was born from shared disappointment and countless conversations. Governments often blame foreign agitators, but Maria and others reclaimed the narrative. This was their movement, their anger, their hope. They used their freedom in Australia to speak for those silenced at home. Flo, a master's student, said the crowd felt empowered, not just angry. Coming together turned helplessness into collective strength. Their demand real reform, not empty apologies or token suspensions. They wanted deep structural change. The stories of Maria, Flo, and others are the heartbeat of the movement. It's the student organizer, the first-time protester, the crowd that becomes family. Their demands were simple: accountability, justice, and leaders who serve the people. The voices from Federation Square formed a powerful chorus for a new Indonesia. This was not radical, it was a call for the basics. The movement's strength was its authenticity and unity. Hope was alive, and the call for change was unmistakable. To understand this moment, look back to 1998, Indonesia's Reformasi. That student-led movement ended Suharto's 32-year rule and brought democracy. Today's protests are the most significant since then, echoing the same anger at corruption and hardship. The cost of living crisis and political greed feel like a return to the Suharto era. For older Indonesians, it's déjà vu. For the young, it's proof Reformasi's promises remain unfulfilled. President Prabowo Subianto, Suharto's former son-in-law, now faces a crisis that revives old fears. The protests aren't just about policy, they're about rejecting a return to authoritarianism. Protesters see themselves as guardians of Reformasi's spirit, fighting to protect hard-won democracy. Chants of Reformasi are a vow. The struggle wasn't in vain, and the people won't give up their power. The past haunts the present, fueling the urgency for real change. Let's return to Affan Kurniawan, the emotional anchor of this movement. At 21, he was a gig worker, hustling long hours for little pay. He represented modern urban Indonesia, essential yet invisible. Affan's job put him at the intersection of technology, urban life, and economic struggle. His death was a collision of the powerless and the powerful. The Brimob vehicle that killed him became a brutal metaphor for state violence. Affan wasn't a politician or elite, just a regular person demanding better. His story humanized the protest, turning abstract anger into personal tragedy. His name and face appeared on posters, signs, and murals. Justice for Affan became a rallying cry for all. The government's apologies rang hollow. People demanded systemic change. Affan's death exposed a deeper disease: impunity and inequality. His legacy is now woven into the movement's fabric. He reminds everyone of the human cost of corruption and oppression. Affan's memory fuels the relentless demand for a just Indonesia. The Melbourne demonstration showed this isn't just an Indonesian issue, it's global. The Indonesian diaspora, from Australia to the US, is watching and organizing. Protests at home have triggered a worldwide chain reaction. Social media connects and mobilizes Indonesians everywhere. Police brutality in Jakarta is seen and condemned in Melbourne within seconds. For those abroad, distance creates urgency, not detachment. These global protests are spontaneous, decentralized, and resilient. The diaspora keeps international attention on Indonesia's crisis. The message to Jakarta, the world is watching, and disappointment has crossed borders. Indonesians everywhere are speaking with one voice for reform. The government responded with a familiar playbook: apologize, then crack down. President Prabowo apologized for Affan's death and cut some perks, a calculated, superficial gesture. Protesters saw through it. They wanted real reform, not token concessions. When apologies failed, the government turned aggressive, labeling protesters as extremists. Security ramped up, military deployed, checkpoints set, snipers on rooftops. Excessive force and censorship followed, including a TikTok live stream ban. The crackdown confirmed protesters' fears. The regime cared more about power than people. The movement faced repression, but the demand for change only grew stronger. The government's response exposed its true priorities to the world. Where does this leave us? A government digging in, a populace refusing to back down. The streets are tense, but hope is alive. From Jakarta to Melbourne, the protests show true power lies with the people. This movement is diverse: students, workers, artists, citizens from all walks of life, united by a vision for a just Indonesia, not by any single leader. The desire for reform is mainstream, not fringe. The road ahead is tough. Setbacks and repression are certain. But the spirit ignited in August 2025 won't be extinguished. Voices like Maria's and Flo's and the memory of Affan have created unstoppable momentum. The elite are reminded. They serve at the people's pleasure. This is what it looks like when people take back their power. Loud, disruptive, necessary. The hope for tomorrow lies in those brave enough to demand it today. A new chapter for Indonesia is waiting to be written.